Let's go ahead and get started and jump into our presentation. And so I'm going to go ahead and get our screen shared so you guys can see what we'll be talking about today. So you have joined us at this webinar to plan your Southeast Alaska travel adventure. And we encourage you at any point to ask questions, and we will try to get those answered as we go along our way. Okay, so we are Eric and Patrick. That's Eric. I'm Patrick, and we're the co-founders of Adventure Flow, a guiding company, adventure guiding company in Alaska. And we offer hiking tours along West Glacier. That's our adventure hiking tour. We have a photo hike tour using smartphone photography technology. And that's a more simplified tour, pretty easygoing and great for families and those who aren't quite ready for the extreme West Glacier, which is not that extreme, but it is a lot of fun. And last, we have a walking tour of the historical downtown Juneau. You want to chime in on those?
No, that's. I think that pretty well covers it. It covers a wide group of skills and desires. Our walking tour covers a lot more of the storytelling and history side of town for those who are history buffs or interested in politics or economics, or or just interested in hearing stories of town and the founding. A tour for all ages. The photo tour is especially good for those looking to learn a little bit more about how to use their smartphone and camera, because we all have camera phones now. Everybody's got one in their pocket, and we realize that a lot of people aren't comfortable using them to their utmost potential. And there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with photography on those phones these days. As for the West Glacier hiking adventure, definitely gets some of the best views around, but you got to work for them. There's a little bit of elevation gain, but you get up and get out on the trail, and we've had everybody from 7-year-olds to 70-year-olds, so it covers a pretty broad range of adventurers.
Absolutely. So when you're coming to Alaska, many people have this vision of what it is, and they know it's beautiful, otherwise they wouldn't be coming up, but they're also slightly concerned about what they might be getting themselves into. And so that is, Alaska is completely covered in snow and ice. Myth. Reality is, this is a common meme that you see popping around, and this is more of what it really is like throughout Alaska, especially Southeast Alaska.
Yeah, for the most part, Alaska gets the rap of being extremely cold and extremely covered in all sorts of snow, and getting tremendous amounts of snow, and just being totally under snow for a large portion of the year, which is, for some places up in the northern part of Alaska, the very tip above the Arctic Circle, is a fairly strong representation of the conditions they live in. But way down here in Southeast Alaska, it's kind of like if you were to place Southeast Alaska over a map of the US, it would be essentially, Southeast would be close to Florida, and the northern part of Alaska would be somewhere in Minnesota. So to give you an idea of just the sheer size of the state that you're dealing with, it would be essentially comparing the winters in Florida to the winters in Minnesota, which I think you can guess would probably be a fair bit different. We're on a maritime climate here, and right on the Pacific Ocean, and so we actually tend to get rain instead of snow through the winter. And then in the summer, most of that snow tends to melt as up in the mountains, and so we end up with quite a lot of water here as part of a temperate rainforest zone.
Absolutely. And so when is the times that you can travel to Alaska? And realistically, any time of the year, coming to Alaska has its benefits, as well as, you know, other reasons why you may not want to come. So the most common time for people to join us in Southeast Alaska is going to be in the summertime. And we've split that down into the early, mid, and late. So we're going to cover each one of those.
So in the early summer here, you can see there's still a bit of snow in the mountains. Mostly the snow has disappeared from the lower elevation. This summer, or this winter, it never even made it below that low elevation for any significant amount of time. And so you still get kind of the white-capped mountains, and you get you know, a lot of beautiful greens, vibrant greens that are shooting up as all the new spring growth is still producing, and you get a lot of buds and the new leaves just sprouting out, which is the early season can be a really good time to see mama bears with groups of cubs. It can be a great time to you can actually save money for a lot of things in the early season, because groups are looking to fill trips, and it's not quite as popular because a lot of families can't start traveling yet because their kids are in school. And it often tends to be some of the sunniest times of the year, is that early summer time between, and this early summer is just about mid-April to mid-June or so, just a little bit before mid-June. You don't have the salmon running yet. You don't have large groups of I guess you don't have a lot of the large groups of migratory birds are still in the process of arriving, but you do get a little bit of a quieter time to yourself in the town. And a lot of these southeast towns are just kind of starting to warm up, so it can feel a little bit more local early in the summer than later on.
After that, we move into the midsummer, which we're putting as, you know, we ended at the mid-June before, so this would go through mid-August roughly. And this is when we start to feel more like summer of what you'd expect. You know, what that photograph, the iconic wildlife starts to come out. Our flowers really start to come into bloom. As you can see in this photograph, from the last one we had, this is a pretty similar angle of what we saw here with the snow-capped peaks. And as we move in, we can see that the peaks have melted and the green the mountains has really popped out.
This time is the most popular time, typically because we start to get our salmon runs will happen, and right about dead center, usually about mid-July. Although it's been kind of weird the last couple of years, we've had really warm winters, and we've started getting a double salmon run, which the salmon run comes pretty late, almost the end of July, and then almost another one comes almost at the end of August or early September, which is really unusual, but getting more salmon runs at different times because the creeks are so warm. We even got some in early June last year. But as our salmon start to come in, our bears start to come down to the creeks, and then you also have a lot of our wildlife is in full bore here. A lot of the seabirds are nesting, so you see a lot of those migratory birds coming in. You see a lot of the migratory whales in the area, and kind of counter to what you might think, it actually becomes our rainiest time of year, going into July and August typically. So we tend to get quite a bit of rain, and we sent records last year with 91 and 92 inches of rain for July and August.
That would be more like yearly, annual.
Or sorry, yeah, our overall annual was higher because of our July and August set records for the most amount of rain that we've ever received in those months.
To put some perspective on the amount of rain that, you know, it typically falls in Juneau, is Seattle is usually getting around in the 30-ish inches of rain per year. Okay, a lot of us are familiar with, you know, how much Seattle can rain, and Juneau, depending on where you're at in the city, it actually differs from one end to the other. We'll get on average, anywhere from 60 to what Eric said, 90 inches of rain, depending on where you're at. And so at least double of what you'd get in the West Coast Washington area. We're getting significantly more.
So then moving into the late summer here, you can see we start to get a little bit of colors. Juneau is definitely not known for its fall colors, but fall tends to come a bit early here. Usually about end of August, beginning of September. And at this point in the fall, you start to get a little bit cooler. It starts to cool off a little bit. Our animals, our migratory animals, start to leave. But also at this time, you start to be able to, during the summer, really long hours of daylight, and it never really gets dark at night. We kind of get this long dusk twilight that happens over the course of the night. So technically we get 6 hours of darkness, but it's never really that dark. And by the time we get into late summer, you start to get darker skies and the possibility of seeing northern lights while you're, especially when you're out in the water and getting away from the cities. You have that potential while you're out there, as long as it's not cloudy, which is lucky if you're able to get to see the night sky. But usually it's still fairly faint because we do still get, it's not really dark until about late September. And we still have some flowers late in the season, but they start to kind of wilt and fade away as we move into more of those fall colors.
As you can see, we do have some fall colors in this picture in front of Mendenhall Glacier. A lot of our trees are more evergreen, and therefore they're not going to be changing color, with the seasons. But this is actually a fairly early picture, and the mountainside does become much more yellow than what you see here. And it is a really beautiful fall. Typically, it's not lasting all that long, actually. Maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's true. Probably the most beautiful part of fall is that all the alpine grass up high above the tree line starts to turn red and orange and yellow, and especially in some of that evening light. They talk about the golden hour of photography for that evening. As the sun starts to go down, and here we get like a golden 3 or 4 hours because of the angle of the sun up here.
Right. And as to continue on to that, we'll move on to what it's like to visit, Southeast in the winter time. And when we do get that sun, Eric was saying that golden hour, it's even more amplified during the winter time on a clear day, with the sun just hanging on that horizon throughout the couple hours that it's up. At its lowest point, we get actual sun. A sun of about 6.5 hours. And then, on either side, it quickly starts to provide more light or less light if we're going into December.
And yeah, so you can see here, skiing is definitely pretty popular among locals here. We also have definitely some heli ski groups, as well as a lot of backcountry ski groups. The snow typically tends to be up higher, up around 3,000 feet. If you look at the photo, you can see the snowboarders here. You're looking down, and down at sea level, there's no snow at all. It tends to be pretty moderate, temperate climate here. We rarely get down below freezing at sea level for, well, I guess we stayed just hover right around, up and down around freezing. And then during the summer, we barely get above 60 degrees. So a pretty narrow band of temperature that we go through here, and pretty much down by the water, it's, usually stays fairly warm considering most winters elsewhere in the States.
Right, and when we say warm, we just mean like right around freezing. So 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, which, in comparison to a lot of other states, they're getting far below freezing. And that's why, we sometimes have incredible ski seasons here, and sometimes they're not so great. This year is kind of okay. It's in the middle. We had a really And then you guys have probably heard in the news with the Iditarod race and how they had to ship snow in from Fairbanks to Anchorage to get it going. And they too had a really good early season, but then it just warmed up, around January, and we haven't had significant snowfall since. That's at the lower elevations. If for anyone willing to hike to it, the higher elevations, there's still really great snow for those willing to work for it. But more realistically, yeah, hanging out closer to sea level is what most people visiting. I won't say most, but where a lot of people are visiting in the winter. And with that, when we do get the clear days, we're going to be able to see the aurora borealis. In Southeast, it's still a real treat when we get to see the auroras when they happen to be strong, as well as when the cloud cover is no longer there and we can see that night sky. And it's absolutely magical. No picture can really do it justice of what it looks like in real life.
It took Patrick a long time to realize that the auroras just didn't happen every time it was clear out, because we had a pretty amazing aurora set up this winter where every time this clouds cleared up, you can almost always see the aurora. That's not always the case, but Patrick's been lucky.
I got lucky this summer. For those who do want to see it, more dependably, the good places to go see the auroras in the wintertime are more around Fairbanks area, where they do see it very consistently. It's usually clear, and they're happening most nights during the winter.
It's also much, much colder.
And yeah, we said 32 degrees, right at freezing here in Southeast. In Fairbanks, you're getting below zero.
Yeah, negative 70 a couple of times this
couple
winter.
of times. I think usually it's more around negative 10, negative 20. Nonetheless, that's very cold. So prepare accordingly when in research when you're going into that type of climate, away from the coast. All right, so what does it take to get to Southeast Alaska? And you got a couple options. One, I don't want to say is the most popular, because that actually runs up to number 2, but airplane is becoming more popular, especially now in the past couple of years, because we've had a lot more competition coming in from other airlines, such as Delta, competing with Alaskan Airlines, that have really brought down prices for both airlines. So I think, I don't want to quote it, but you can get flights to Juneau, for instance. I think round trip from Seattle for around $250, so round trip, and sometimes cheaper than that, sometimes a little more. But yeah, they're becoming really competitive, and so that's a great option. So whatever the cost is for you to just add on another $200 to $250 per person, and that's about what it takes to get to Juneau.
So as Patrick kind of led into, a cruise ship is definitely the most popular way to get to Southeast Alaska, largely because obviously the ships carry a lot more people than airplanes can. But as people jump on the cruise ships and head up the coast, stopping at a couple of Southeast Alaskan towns, they definitely come through. The advantage of taking an airplane, if you're planning on independent travel, is you obviously have more leeway as to how much time you want to spend in a place and how long you want to stay in one spot. Whereas with a cruise ship, you will only spend a portion of one day in each location that you go to.
Yeah, so it is a huge advantage in some regards to be able to come via plane, or what we're going to talk about on the Alaska Marine Highway, simply because you get more flexibility to stay longer. And one thing I like to think about for Southeast Alaska is just to relate it to how many adventure opportunities there are. I like to think about how many restaurants there are in big cities. Since I used to live in Los Angeles, and I could go to a different restaurant every day for like my whole life there, and I never go to them all. And here in Southeast, it's like you go on a different adventure in a completely different area, and they're mostly fairly accessible to get started. And I could do something totally different every day, and I would still never do them all, in my lifetime. There's just so many opportunities for people willing to kind of go out and search for it. And so it's not just hiking, but it's kayaking, It's we started pack rafting, get out on a canoe in the water, get a boat and go whale watching and just go to all the different locations, ample amounts of fishing to take advantage of. We saw skiing, snowboarding,
glacier trekking, flight seeing tours, helicopter tours.
Rock climbing is around. Man, there's a lot of, if you can think of a sport, there's probably a good place to do it. Or yeah, a good outdoor sport, a good location to do it, here in Southeast.
Just to give you an idea, for coming here on your own and in terms of doing things, doing something different every day. Here in Juneau, we have about 300 miles of trails that you can connect to right off of the road system, which is pretty impressive. And there's just more as soon as you get off onto some of the islands and the outer peninsulas and other places. And a lot of these trails are unique to different environments on their own.
Yeah.
So the last, well, the number 4 here, we have a road sometimes. Pretty much almost all of the communities in Southeast Alaska are not accessible by road. Hence the reason why airplanes and cruise ships and the ferry systems are much more popular way of getting here. Because Alaska is a pretty big place, and if you were to take the ferry or the cruise ship, you can take it out of Washington or Vancouver to come up the coast and head up to the Inside Passage there. If you wanted to drive a little bit further, you can drive up to Prince Rupert and catch the ferry system there. Or if you wanted to drive right into Southeast Alaska, there's 2 towns that you could do it, well, 3 technically, but you could go all the way around from Prince Rupert, which is in British Columbia, which is not far from the southern tip of Southeast Alaska. And if you take it by ferry, it'll take you a day and a half. Or if you wanted to drive, you would have to drive 1,500 miles around up the Alcan or the Cassiar Highway to get to Skagway or Haines. It's pretty rugged, rough country, and it is a beautiful drive. I've done both of them multiple times, and they are definitely unique. And it's a Yukon, which are also amazing place, Southeast Alaska, Skagway or Haines. You can then take the ferry down as well into some of these other towns. Most towns in Southeast Alaska have a ferry terminal.
Yeah.
Where that's something else too with the ferry system is you can bounce between a lot of little towns, whereas on the cruise ship there's really very few towns that you stop in. Usually Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway or Haines, and some of them go. So if you wanted a little bit more of a small town off the beaten path, like Petersburg or Gustavus or a lot of these other small towns that are still cool little fishing towns, you'll have to get there either by plane or the Alaska Marine Highway.
So that leaves us with the last route into Southeast Alaska, and we say this as a joke usually, but it's very true. And that is, if these are, what other way could you possibly be transported into Southeast Alaska?
So you come here and it's a sunny day, it's beautiful out, you fall in love with the place, maybe you fall in love with the person you came here with, and you end up moving here, you buy a house, you realize it rains all the time, so you get stuck here, and then you have a kid, and the last way to get here is by birth canal.
Good every time. So once you're here, we've already chatted a lot about what things you can see when you're here, but we're going to dive into those into more detail. And so throughout Southeast, Juneau is really nestled up against the Juneau ice field. And so we have these glaciers that are coming down from the ice field sporadically throughout. And what you see pictured here is the famous Mendenhall Glacier that is extremely accessible right when you get into port in Juneau.
So part of this, the Juneau ice field is a lot of people do, there's popular to do glacier trekking or just hiking along the side just to see it, paddling on the lake in front of it, or probably one of the most highly visible is the helicopter tours. There's a lot of helicopter tours that go and land on the glacier. They do ice climbing and trekking, and they do dog sledding up on the glacier. So there's a lot of options for adventure if you're planning to get out and get out on a glacier and actually really immerse yourself in what it is to be on a huge moving sheet of ice like that. The Mendenhall is only one of about 38 named glaciers on the ice field, and you can also go to other ones like Eagle Glacier, Herbert Glacier. Some tours go to Taku Glacier down south. All of these glaciers are pretty impressive for different reasons, and being able to get up on them and really feel what a glacier is like is definitely a big dream of a lot of visitors that come here.
And then Skagway and Haines, I believe, also have tours that'll take you to glaciers.
Yeah, which is also part of the Juneau ice field.
Right, right. Perfect. So when you also arrive, as you know, we see all these mountainsides, and when you dip into those, quickly as you get into the forest, this is really what it looks like. And there's just moss everywhere. And so that is typically what most people notice first when they walk into the forest here, is that they see that there's these deep, vibrant greens that are pretty much covering every side of you. And the moss, as you take a look at it, you start seeing there's so many different textures to it, and there's just hundreds of different kind of moss spread out throughout the area. Eric, tell us about, you know, how many different kinds of moss are there, and tell us about the biomass of moss and just how much life is built into it.
Well, to give you a little bit of an aspect for this temperate rainforest that we live in here, you know, people often think of rainforest as only tropical, but there's actually two very definitive types of rainforest, and one is the temperate rainforest, which we live in here, and one is the tropical rainforest that you're more familiar with and hear about. And for this forest, within a square mile of an old growth temperate rainforest here, there is more life by weight of living matter than there is in any other environment in the world. And even the tropical rainforest, and that is just it goes to show how extremely rich this environment is here, and it's something you can really feel when you walk into the forest around here. People often notice that it's fairly quiet in our forest here compared to other forests that they are familiar with, and that's largely because a lot of our biomass here is plant life. We have a lot of plant life, and some very large plant life, a lot of really big trees, the spruce, Sitka spruce and the western hemlock, some of the largest trees in the world, and they are extremely important to this environment here. And they provide a lot of growth and a lot of shade for all this moss to grow. And moss, we have about 700 different species of moss here in Southeast Alaska. And those species all fill particular niches within a certain area, and they also are home to a tremendous amount of small invertebrate life. The University of Oregon did a study about 10 years ago now, but they found that for every step you take on a bed of moss, you're stepping on the back of about 16,000 different invertebrate species. So this rich environment leads home to a lot of our migratory animals that come back up here. Some our bears stay here year round, and sometimes don't even hibernate because our winters are so mild. But as things start to return, a lot of our mass that comes from salmon and other animals feeds this forest as well, and creates a very rich soil. In other places in the world, you may use peat moss for your gardens. That's all we have here is peat moss, so we actually have to import soil if we want gardens.
Awesome, and now let's step into what is utilizing this rainforest, and it's providing the environment to let them thrive, and that is the wildlife that people are coming here that they've heard so much about to see. And when you're stepping off your cruise ship or the plane, you're going to see, black bears, what we see here, pretty sporadically throughout, Juneau and the rest of Southeast Alaska, as well as brown bears as well. And one of the most common places in Juneau to see the black bears is at the Mendenhall Recreation Area. They have incredible viewing platforms while they're feeding on salmon in the nearby creeks. And so although it's never a guarantee, you can never guarantee that you're going to see wildlife such as the black bears, or in this lower photo, we have a porcupine, or it's a little baby porcupine, and so we call them porcupets, very cute. And we have the salmon as they're working their way upstream to spawn.
So we don't have birds here listed on here, but definitely the Audubon is a big part of Southeast Alaska here because of our large amount of migratory birds that come through here. Obviously, we have a very healthy portion of eagles here, unlike in the rest of the in North America. We saw a huge bald eagle decline. Here, we never really had that issue with DDT, and so since agriculture isn't very large here, it wasn't an issue, and we've never really lost our eagle populations. And so we have a tremendous eagle population. We have a lot of seabirds. We have a lot of even land migratory birds. We get hummingbirds, quite a lot of hummingbirds here. And as all this wildlife starts to move in, you can count sometimes up to 300 different species of migratory birds coming through here.
When you get off land and you hop on a boat, you're going to find yourself with enormous amounts of sea life, and the whales are the typical creatures that we see popping up above the water. But below it is also a huge ecosystem that is feeding all these whales and other mammals that we get to really enjoy.
Along with whales, we get pinnipeds like sea lions and harbor seals. The Steller sea lion is the largest sea lion in the world, and we get a lot of what they're feeding on. Sometimes they will bring up to the surface. You can see crabs and octopus and a lot of these animals that typically are on the floor that you don't get to see as much on that ocean floor. Sometimes you can get to see Dall's porpoise. They're probably one of my favorites. They look kind of like a shrunken orca, but very, very fast. As you can often see them playing in the wakes of boats, especially big boats. They love to play off the back of the wake. If you're lucky to see a harbor porpoise, they're pretty shy, but a lot that you can see out in the water really are what bring the ocean to life during the summer here, since most of them will take off for the winter.
Yeah. So one thing that's unique that a lot of the whale watching boats are looking for are the humpback whales that we see in the lower left image. And what's unique to these humpback whales is that they're doing a feeding technique called bubble net feeding. And that's where the humpbacks are going around in a circle beneath the water. And then there's a leader that indicates on a couple of the other humpback whales to then swoop through the middle. And what that circle is creating is a vortex to capture other fish like herring. And then a series of other humpbacks come up to the middle, and then they just erupt out of the middle to capture, hopefully with thousands of herring. And when you see it, you can just see them all coming up out of the water all at once. And then you see all the seagulls, you see some of the seagulls in the water, dive down to try to catch their own part in the whole frenzy as well.
And the bubble net feeding is pretty unique to this area. It's actually a learned behavior. It's not instinctual. You don't see it in other groups of humpbacks elsewhere in the world. Very few locations do this, and not even all the humpbacks that are here in Southeast Alaska partake or know how to bubble net feed. So this is definitely one of the most exciting portions of the whale activity here. However, you know, you come in the early season and you won't see a whole lot of bubble net feeding typically around here, but you'll see moms and calves starting to come up from as they come up from Hawaii. You'll often see a little bit less activity earlier in the season, but you do get to see the babies a lot more. And then as you get into the mid-season, you often start to see a lot of this bubble net feeding. And as you get into the late season, that's often the best time for seeing breaches and other exciting activity. However, you know, as Patrick mentioned earlier, they are wild animals, so obviously none of that is guaranteed in your excursions.
Last, we're going to just chat about, you know, of things to do and see is the mountains. And as you're coming up the Inside Passage, you're just going to be greeted with so many spectacular mountain ranges. And what you see along here is the coastal mountain range. And, you know, coming off of the snow-capped peaks, you'll start to see just the vibrant green that's covering a lot of these mountain ranges, and just in Juneau especially, we do have just so many trails that you can take advantage of to kind of get above the ocean, be with those mountain peaks, and really kind of fully absorb the energy that they're really giving off. And it's just a huge healing factor of being in this ultimate untouched wilderness so easily and quickly.
And as you know, Patrick mentioned, getting up on the mountains, you know, for those who aren't ready to scale a mountain on their own, there is also right from downtown, you can hop on a tram and go up about 1,800 feet.
So we're talking about downtown Juneau.
Yeah, you can hop on the Mount Roberts tramway, and it takes you up, and then there's a small group of trails you can hike around that, so this way you don't have to gain that 1,800 feet on your own necessarily.
That's what this upper right corner or upper right photo is of. It's showing
that's Douglas
Harbor, and this is on the Mount Roberts Trail up above the tram station. And then over on the left we have Eagle Beach, and actually both of these are Eagle Beach, and this is one of the eagles that are often flying around feeding.
Taking it at mountains, which is across the Lynn Canal. If you're heading up or down from Skagway or Haines, you'll be heading up the Lynn Canal, which is, you know, to give you an idea, looking over at those mountains as you're looking across, you know, you're going straight from sea level up to about 6,000 feet or so on a lot of those mountains. Some of them as high as 8,000 feet. And the water that you're going over in the Lynn Canal is about 2,000 feet deep. So it gives you just an extreme difference in dynamic range of these mountainous areas.
So this all sounds great and cool and wonderful, but one thing you'll realize when you're doing your research is, well, how the heck do you get around to all these awesome places? And the reality is it's sometimes difficult. It can also sometimes be expensive, depending on, you know, what resources are available, what city you're in, and whatnot. And so probably the most popular way is to join a tour, and they'll have a bus, and they will take you to these places and provide you with a guide, or sometimes it's just transportation, you know, to the locations. And so tour bus, you know, would be number one, and you can look at, you know, the tours that you're interested in, and they're going to handle getting you to and from the locations that they'll be exploring. There's definitely a significant number of locations that, you know, don't have tours going to them that are really remarkable, and then you have these other options to get there, to get to those. So like taxi is one. Taxis unfortunately aren't in enough quantity to actually help everybody who probably want one, and so it can sometimes take a long time to hail a cab and actually to get where you want to go.
Well, I guess, well, so both sides. A lot of our taxis here also function as tour operators,
right,
as well. So if you are booking a taxi as a tour because you want something a little more private and something that you can organize a little bit more and have a little bit more of control of where you go, taxis are, you know, a great way to get to places where tours don't go. because they have the capacity to change their course and direction as to where they want to go. Where a tour, you're really locked into whatever it is that you're doing. So if you don't have something specific in mind that a tour goes to, a taxi is a nice way to pick and choose where you might want to go and not have to drive or worry about taking care of that. But if you're just trying to get a taxi to get from one place to another, they're less likely to make you a priority. So keep that in mind.
There's a lot of taxi drivers that are essentially tour guides, and they actually pre-book tours on their taxi as well. So you can definitely do some research on those types of options. I would say try to pre-book everything before you actually arrive. It can save you a lot of hassle in the long run. There is at each port, there's going to be locations that you can purchase tours right there. Sometimes they're good deals, sometimes they're not, as far as what you can pre-book, and then a lot of times they're not actually selling what is fully available. A lot of the times it's just going to be available online when you're doing your own research. So I definitely say do the research and pre-book if possible, because you can definitely pre-book everything that they're selling there. And so if you know what you're looking for, it's definitely worth it.
And something also to consider too when you show up to these places, everything is pretty novel. Whether you've been to Alaska before or not, Southeast is a very different place if you've been to the northern part of Alaska or some other portion. And really, when you have to start thinking about planning and booking tours as soon as you get off the dock and arrive, it's really a zoo. Especially if you come by cruise ship, you're getting off with about 10,000 other people around the same time. On the day that you arrive, and it floods downtown this area, and there's all sorts of people are trying to sell tours and trying to get people places, and it can really be overwhelming. And I've definitely seen a lot of people on the docks who didn't book anything because they wanted to save a little bit of money. And book on the dock, and sometimes they don't actually end up saving any money, and they're pretty stressed out by the time they get on their tour.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do want to do more of a seat of the pants type adventure and just see whatever comes to you on the day that you get off, I would suggest that you don't do it because you think you're going to save money, because I would do it more because of the adventure of planning something on the seat of your pants.
Absolutely. As far as like booking, tours and whatnot, or pre-booking specifically, what's the difference between booking on the cruise ship websites versus booking on a reseller website like Viator that's really popular versus booking on maybe an actual tour operator's website? And with those, both resellers like Viator and the cruise ships, they're working directly with the tour operators, and so they're the ones. Rarely are they actually the ones operating the tour, and they're simply middlemen to help get the word out about a tour and to make it available to them. And so a lot of times it is more beneficial to go directly to the actual tour operator's website and book it directly with them, because they're going to be able to provide you better information about what the tour is. They're going to give you realistic expectations of here's what it is, whereas the other platforms, in my own experience, is sometimes we have limited resources to actually communicate that information very, very efficiently. And so I definitely do the research to try to figure out who the actual tour operator is and see what information they have on their website to really get the full picture of what they have to offer.
So we covered tour buses and taxis. If you really want to do it independent and drive, take care of yourself, there is a rental car drive at the airport. There's rental car spots there. If you arrive by cruise ship, there's rental car spots down by the docks as well. So there are options if you have a particular place in mind. If you're planning on going out to some place like Eagle Beach, or you want to go out to a trail that's off the beaten path like Herbert Glacier, then you probably want to get a rental car so that you can get out there and have your adventure on your own, get away from the crowds. And you know, obviously the downfall is that you have to rent the car and you have to drive the car, but it gives you that that extra freedom. The next one, the public bus, is probably is fairly limited here in what you can do.
Probably limited to all other Southeast cities. When we say here, we say Juneau, and all the other Southeast, I don't think have a very substantial system either.
However, that being said, for some specific places, it ends up being a lot cheaper. Like I know if you end up in Sitka, you get off on the cruise ship. There's a bus that will take you downtown for $20, or you can take the public bus for $1. So you know, there's obviously a bit of a price difference. You know, the bus that takes you directly downtown, like they, you know, go straight from there to downtown. The public bus makes a couple of extra stops, but it's the same thing in Sitka, or sorry, in Juneau rather, where you can hop on the public bus from downtown and you get off on the Glacier Spur Road and you can hike up on one of the trails towards the glacier for I think it's $2 or $5, I can't remember. Whereas with a tour, you're, you know, again going to pay $20 for a bus ride to get you out there.
And the primary thing to think about is, you know, the public bus system, its purpose is to serve the local community. And so that's where they're focusing their efforts. And so the time schedules are around, you know, making it most efficient for those local community members. However, obviously, visitors coming in are more than welcome to use it. You're just going to have to do the research to figure out the bus routes, whether it can actually get you where you want to go. I'll just say right now that the public bus does not take you all the way to Mendenhall Glacier. It's a really common question. It takes you about maybe a mile and a half, drops you off maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles away, and then you could walk the rest of the way if you wanted. But if you're on a pretty strict time schedule, it may not be the best way of going about it, and either taking a tour, you know, to where you want to go, or you know, hopping on a more tour bus that, you know, specific for transportation to and from these popular locations.
So so those are kind of how to get out and away from town. But if you, the amazing thing here in Southeast Alaska is that you are, I mean, you land in, you know, if you're in downtown Juneau, or really anywhere in Juneau, there's
Ketchikan, Skagway, they all have incredible downtowns.
Well, there's probably a trail within a mile or two of wherever you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, landing here, you know, if you get into a lot of these towns have a kind of a walking tour posted of town with information about certain places and things to see, and so exploring on your own can be fun. Just getting out and walking around. For here in Juneau, you know, we have one of my favorite trails is right in the back end of Juneau. It's called Perseverance Trail. It was the first road built in Alaska, and goes out over, you know, an amazing canyon with a beautiful waterfall, and you can take it all the way up into the mountains. There's lots of different forks off of it that go up different places. And so if you just want to get out for a hike on your own and you don't want to have to worry about all the hustle and bustle, probably, you know, you would be a portion of about maybe 5% of visitors that would go up and go out on that trail. You're much more likely to see locals getting out on a trail like that. As with biking too, you know, you can, if you have a bike that you're bringing with you, if you come on the ferry especially, people do come up and bike a lot of towns through Southeast Alaska.
There are opportunities to rent bikes in Juneau.
There's also a pedicab downtown that you can rent a pedicab and just kind of get shuttled around in some of the places downtown, like the State Museum, and you know, some of the places that are a little further away from the main dock area. But yeah, so there's lots of options for you to be able to get around and see everything else.
Awesome. So I think that wraps up our presentation. Now we're gonna kick it over to some of the Q&A. So we're going to stop our screen, come back over to us. And let's see, looking here, and let's see, I don't think we have any questions that popped up during our presentation. Yeah, and so I think we're good, actually. So yeah, that concludes our presentation here today. And we're going to be doing these weekly, so if you're missing this or you're watching this after the fact, we encourage you to jump onto a future broadcast, just exploring what it's like to come to Southeast Alaska, and a lot of the things that it takes in order to get here. And so we'll be back here soon, and feel free to spread this around to your friends. And if you have we open the invitation to go check out our website, look at the tours we offer, and feel free to get in touch with us by their email, support@adventureflow.us, or we have our 855, our toll-free number on our website that you can use to get in touch with us, and we're happy to answer any questions, just really regarding anything. Okay.
All right.
Marks.
Take care. Adventure on.
Adventure on. Thanks, everybody.